Our guest today is unscripted, he's loose, and he's a lot of fun. We're excited to welcome in Derrick Girard on the Limitless Leadership Lounge. I am John Gehring, joined as always by Dr. Numa Kareem, Coach Jim Johnson, and today's conversation we know will benefit you as a young and emerging leader, whether you're a leader of a business, an organization, maybe a leader in the educational world, or just a leader in your community or in your family. This is for you. So, Coach, go ahead and introduce Derrick. Let's dive in today.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a chance to get connected through one of our uh, connections, and I got a chance to talk to Derek, and he's got some fascinating stories I know he's going to be able to share with us. So let me just give you a little bit of background. Derek Girard is a former financial advisor turned tech entrepreneur. He founded the MyRep Chat to solve a real problem in the industry, scaled it without a sales team, and landed major financial firms nationwide. Despite facing three lawsuits at once, which I'm sure we're going to delve a little bit into, from an investor, a competitor, and even a family member, he fought through and won and ultimately sold the company in 2023. Now he helps others embrace what he calls the FIO, the figure it out mindset, the key to navigating obstacles and building something that lasts. And he also is a speaker and he's the author of Put to the Test. When life demands more, will you make excuses or figure it out? Without further ado, Derek Girard, welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Thank you for having me. That was a great introduction. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I got to ask you, I did get a chance to talk to you, but we got to share this with the audience. So tell us a little bit about your journey from financial advisor to being a tech entrepreneur. And then certainly we've got to add a little spice to it with maybe a little bit about the lawsuit. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly wasn't planned. It certainly wasn't intentional. I never had any desires to do that. It was sort of accidental. So I found myself in this unique position. I work generally with retired people and people that are nearing retirement. And I found myself in this position where my clients kept texting me. And back then in 2016, this would have been, it was against the rules, against the regulations to communicate through text. You weren't allowed to do it. And so all the
mm,
different requirements in order to have written communications couldn't be met through a text message at that point.
mhm.
And so I went to my compliance officer and said, "Hey, there's got to be a solution to this problem. What do I do?" And my compliance officer said, "There isn't. So you just cannot do it." So I told my clients I can't text. It's against the rules. Don't communicate through text with me. We have to use email or phone call. And what I learned was that my clients didn't really care. This is how they chose to communicate. So they just kept texting. And so figure it out to me is, it's one of those things that I think a lot of people say that sometimes when it sort of means not my problem. Like when you hear that word used or that phrase used, or like you figure it out. What that means is not my problem. Well, to me, I felt like this is my problem. I have to solve this. Otherwise, I'm going to break all these rules and get in trouble. And so I just started down this journey of asking questions. I just wanted to know how to solve this problem. What was the regulations? What was the problem? What was the challenges? What was getting in the way? And that ultimately led me to my uncle, who was a computer programmer. And I said, "Hey, this is what I want to build. If I tell you what to build, can you build it?" And he said, "Yes, I can do that." And we were
Mhm.
just kind of off to the races from that point on. And then I started showing it and sharing it with other people because I kind of knew the industry was looking for it. And when I started showing it and sharing it with everybody else, I realized, holy cow, this isn't a solution just for me. This is a solution everybody wants. And that's when it kind of went from this really cool idea to something much bigger. And that's where I ended
Mhm.
up as the founder of a tech company.
Yeah.
Wow. And I think I resonate with you on figuring it out because everybody tells me that I am crazy, like leaving my full-time job and then starting my own nonprofit. Then I'm planning for another startup company. And I will figure it out. Everybody keep telling me, you don't have the experience in the business world. I said, I will figure it out.
Yep.
And there are so many tools. But one thing I have realized that crisis and chaos gives opportunity to learn and grow. So I have learned so much from I started a school and there was like this lady who took control of my school. Then I have a lawsuit and all those kind of thing. and now I'm learning what to do and what not to do.
Yep.
So, from your point of view, how do you see, how did the crisis help you to grow? What are some lessons that you learned from these crises?
It's the biggest crisis obviously was the lawsuits, right? Feeling like we were hitting this point where I knew the trajectory of the company. I knew it was going to take a little bit of time. The financial services industry is very slow to adapt new things.
Right.
And so I knew I had to get the name out there. I knew I had to get the solution out there, but I also knew it was going to take time. And right as the pendulum started swinging, where not only were we landing real, substantial clients, we were landing the biggest fish in the pond. Like the big ones were coming to
Mm,
us. And it was right at that point when everything went sideways. And so for me, it was a test ultimately of can I actually do what I preach and can I do what I believe firmly in my heart? But the other thing was, and I said this to my son the other day, it was an opportunity for me to prove how much I enjoyed learning, which
Mhm.
is weird, right? I wasn't the greatest student in high school. My son's in high school, and he said to me the other day, Dad, I feel like now I'm actually enjoying learning. And he said it like this was an epiphany. And I said, I'm glad you figured that out in high school. I didn't figure that out till college, right? That I
right,
actually enjoyed learning. And
right.
so that crisis, that chaos, it was just this moment of I can either step up and do what I believe is right and learn and educate myself, or I can just shut down. And I think a lot of people do because that scares them and they don't know what to do. So they crawl back into what feels comfortable. And so for me, that was like I say to everybody else, when these lawsuits hit, I became a law student. And it sounds crazy, but I
Yeah,
just had three different lawsuits in three different areas. All I did on top of running the business, I barely slept. All I did was just study the law. I had to know everything that was going on. So I wasn't just being surprised day in and day out.
Yeah, you became a student of it, and
I
that's what we
did.
all have to do in leadership. Now, going back further a little bit, because some
Hmm.
people might call you an accidental entrepreneur, right? You found a
Hmm.
problem and you solved it. But I would argue that there has to be mindsets and processes in place that you had before you came across this problem and became an entrepreneur. I mean, is there even such a thing as an accidental entrepreneur? What
Yeah.
mindsets did you establish throughout your career before finding a solution to that problem?
So many things you just said there that I'm so excited to touch on. The first thing is I love speaking on college campuses and getting in front of students, and I love getting in front of entrepreneurial students and students because there's now degrees, there's majors for entrepreneurship, which I think is really interesting. What I have found in my experience is that most entrepreneurs don't start off and don't set out to be an entrepreneur. Most of them are just problem solvers.
Yeah.
And so it's in my experience, I've met students before that have said, look, we want to be an entrepreneur. We're going to start a company to do this. And I go, great. Walk me through why that. And they go, well, we don't know. Well, what's the market for it? Well, we're hoping to figure it out. What's the need? I don't know. Right. And so they're in their mind, like, we're going to be an entrepreneur. And then we work our way back to the problem. And I think most really great entrepreneurs and products and success stories start with the problem. And then you become the entrepreneur, right? And you just sort of find yourself
mm,
fitting in that bucket.
right.
And so I never really had this idea that I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Previous in my career, I was given the opportunity to run my own firm and sort of step out and be that entrepreneur. And I failed. And I talk about this in the book. Perspective is massive, right? It's so important to have that perspective, to know what I did wrong so I know how to get it right. And I think a lot of people that crushes them as well. So it wasn't that I was sort of an accidental entrepreneur. I never saw myself going into the tech space, but I always saw myself, and I have been my entire life, a problem solver. So when there's a problem, I firmly believe excuses don't solve problems. So I don't care what the problem is, we have to find a solution one way or the other. And in this case, it just led me to being the creator of a product and a company that solved the problem.
Very cool. Well, Derrick, you said you like to speak to college students. So
Hmm.
let's delve into it. So, because obviously with the Limitless Leadership Lounge, and we want to help young and emerging leaders.
Hmm.
Can you zero down to if you were helping young, college students, not necessarily all college students are young, but most of them are,
Yeah.
is that what advice would you give them on how to be a more effective leader?
Well, the biggest thing that I share all the time is listen. ask questions and listen. All of your, I firmly believe this in life and in business and in leadership, all of your answers are in your questions, not your statements. And
Mhm.
so many people, especially young people who, in my experience, again, I was the same way. So I'm not blasting somebody else. I was the same way. I think young people that get to a position of authority or management or leadership, they think the title means something. And the reality is that the title doesn't. It's how you behave, it's how you interact, it's how you ask questions. The greatest leaders in the world don't have the answers, but they know how to engage the audience and ask the right questions and empower people. And so I think, especially when people are young, they get real sort of power hungry and title hungry, and they realize it really doesn't make you a good leader. In fact, it can do the opposite really, really fast.
Hmm.
Again, I learned that the hard way, right? I mean, I came out of the military and went into leadership in the civilian world, and I had to learn in real time that military style leadership doesn't work in the civilian world, right?
Hmm.
So all these different lessons you learn as you grow and you develop, that was really important to me. So my advice to anybody is college students or, young leaders or even experienced leaders, if you find yourself not being as effective as you want, stop and reflect and find out, like, am I asking more questions than I'm making statements? Am I engaging people? Am I letting people talk?
Hmm.
Most of the time, the answer is no. You're just not. You're not doing that as well as you should be, and that's the difference between either being not very good and good or being good to great. Is can you ask really good questions and listen?
Yeah,
Right.
we've had
And yeah.
whole episodes on that, on military leadership versus other types of leadership. It's a
Mm.
fascinating topic. Go ahead, Renuma.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In the
and
military,
I
I can
think
tell you, right, real quick, in the military, I can tell you what to do. You can't talk back. You can't
Right,
leave.
right.
You have to do it. In the civilian world, I come down to you too hard, you just disappear because you leave and you find a new job.
Yeah,
And so it
yeah,
just doesn't work.
but I love some aspect of the military leadership because the discipline,
Hmm.
I think that is what lacking in the real world. So a lot of the discipline of time management, talking to
Hmm.
people, respecting others. I think those are some tools that we can really assimilate into the civilian world. And those are the things that I like to teach my volunteers and my students. Like discipline is one thing that will give you the edge.
Yep.
So from your point of view, I have seen, and you are so right that nowadays, and I think this is a different generation as well because they are digital natives, while we were immigrants. So the digital world, you mentioned that texting was like everything has to be email. Nowadays, when I'm dealing with the younger generation, Gen Zs, they only want to have like, let's create a WhatsApp group,
Yep.
texting. They do not want to email,
Yep.
send everything through text. So that has been the norm. And I had to adjust and adapt to those changes. So from your point of view, how do we like combine those elements of military type of leadership and also the usual real life leadership to create that path of effective leadership technique? Any
Yeah.
ideas that you are practicing?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. There's an organization I'm working with now that over the years they've had their leadership has gotten harebrained ideas, new ideas. We're going to implement this. And they get so excited, they get so gung-ho, they tell everybody, here's what we're going to do. It's going to be different, it's going to be revolutionary. You're all going to love it. It's going to change everything. And at the end of the day, what ends up happening is nothing changes. In fact, it goes the other way because when nothing changes, the people stop believing in the leadership statements and their exuberance and all that stuff just sort of goes down. They go, yeah, we've tried this before, we've tried this, we've tried this. And so when I was brought in, one of the things that I've been doing is I've spent a ton of time interviewing everybody here, just picking their brain, asking a million questions and saying very few things. And as I went and I rolled out to them the changes that need to be made in the structure and the processes for how things are being done so they can systematize and scale, I had
Mhm.
one gentleman say to me, well, why aren't you just coming in and telling us what we have to do? Just come in and tell us. And I just, when he said it to me, it kind of took me back. And I went, has that strategy worked yet in this organization?
Mhm.
And he said, no. And I went, so why would you ask me to do that? Again,
Mm,
all I'm doing is asking questions, right? I could tell him, I think you're wrong, but instead I want him to tell me. And so I was just
Mm.
trying to get him to understand. And then he finally realized what I was doing was I'm engaging everybody here so we can collectively get on the same page and we're all moving forward in the same direction. I said to somebody the other day, they said, this is a big uphill battle. And I went, yeah, I just need people to help remove obstacles and stop putting them in the way. But yes, it's still an uphill battle. It doesn't need to be any harder than it already is. And
Hey,
so,
Derek, can I just interject? Because
of
I'm
course,
right with you that in fact, I kid people that I think effective leaders are the CQA, the chief question askers.
yep.
But I'm always looking for, can you give us just a couple examples of some of the questions you use? Because I think that's fascinating.
Well, I use a very interesting acronym, and I write this down if I'm going to go into a discussion, DGFRT. And one of the things that I always try to do in that acronym is the first, it stands for define. I want to know everything. Tell me what this means to you. Tell me what success is. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. I
Mm,
want to know as much as I can. Define for me the world that we live in, what it is that I need to know. And then going is the G. Tell me what's going towards this and tell me what's going against it. Tell me everything that's working, tell me everything that's getting in the way, right? So I want to know everything about what we're trying to accomplish and where we're going. And then I want to know what's working and what's not working, everything we have going for us and going against us. And then I want to know feel. So the next thing is feel. How do you feel about the progress? How do you feel about the momentum? How do you feel about what's been tried and what's failed? And how do you feel about the turnover, people that have left or people that have been brought on? I want to know everything about it. And then recap. Let me tell you what I think I heard. So I've defined it. You told me what you have going for it. You tell me how you feel. Now I'm going to repeat back to you what I think I've heard. And I always say that. I'm going to repeat back to you what I think I've heard. So tell me if I'm missing something or if I said I'm catching something wrong or I'm missing it completely. Most of the time I'm not. And then the last thing I do is tie in. Let me tell you how I think I can help, and I'd love your feedback on that. Right.
mm.
And then at the end of the day, you do that in a conversation. It is amazing. They're sitting there going, yeah, you heard me correctly. You understand how I feel. You repeated it back to me, and you've painted the vision for how we're going to do this thing moving forward. And
right.
now when I ask them for your help, can you help me in these areas as we do this? Can you be a
Mm.
champion in this area when we're trying to get over this hurdle or this hump? Can you help me engage this team? They never say no, right? They're excited now that it's not just me telling them what we're going to do, but they
Right.
were engaged in the entire process.
That's great. Thank you
Very
for
Yeah.
sharing
interesting.
that.
So
Yeah.
I've been asked over the years many times, can you tell me the questions? I never give the questions out because I don't know what they are. And I
Yeah.
don't want people to use a script because scripts become just sort of mindless answers without people even understanding what they're writing. I just want to use a framework. Let's just use the framework as we guide the conversation. And if I'm doing it right and I ask really good follow-up questions, we'll have a really good conversation.
Mhm. Now, Derek, you went from a trained in financial services, right? Trained
Mhm.
in that area to now you run a business and you have to be a salesperson, you have to be an account manager, you have to be marketing, all of those roles, and you were
Mhm.
able to scale that without a huge team.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about how you did that, even in a non-traditional way.
Well, the most important thing, and I say this all the time, and I certainly didn't create this phrase. This was said to me many years ago. I repeat this constantly. Is I never let the tail wag the dog. When I was selling the company, so many people would say to me, "How did you build this thing and land all of these massive clients? Right? What makes you so different than the competition that's out there?" And that was always my answer: is I never let the tail wag the dog. I was the user of the product. Again, I solved the problem that I saw for myself. And so I was the advisor. I was also the compliance officer. I was licensed to do both. And so I understood both sides of the equation, what compliance needs to see and what the advisor wants to see. All of my competition, everybody that I competed with regularly out there in the marketplace, eventually, when there was more, they were all built and developed by engineers. And there's
Mm,
nothing wrong with the engineer, but the engineer doesn't know what I went through as an advisor. They don't know what the compliance officer goes through. They just know how to write the product and build the tool. So the difference was I gave the instruction and the guidance to the engineers, and they built what I asked them to build. All these other companies that I competed with, every time you'd see it, you go, does this person even know what we do as an advisor? Do they even know what we're looking for? And the answer is no, they don't. And so it was just built completely different. So how I did it was that was the foundation. I knew the audience. I knew they were going to be very difficult. I knew they were going to be very stubborn. They're going to want certain things. And we built it with that in mind. The next thing we did, and the reason we could do it without a sales team, was I listened to the users. And so everybody knew when there's something you liked or didn't like, I want to know. I personally want to know. Tell me. And so if it's not right, then you know darn well I'm going to make sure it's right. Not in 6 months, not in 9 months, not in 12 months. There were sometimes, John, and this is no joke. I was talking to an advisor one time who used a CRM that I had never heard of. And as I'm talking to him, I sent a message to my engineer and I said, how long would it take to build the integration with this CRM? And no joke, before the 30-minute demo was done, I told the guy on the other end of the phone, can you please refresh your screen? And it was there.
Wow.
It was that fast. That's how we did things. So my team was they were so good at what they did. They knew we were small, they knew we were nimble, but they also knew that I didn't like to drag my feet because our customers didn't want to wait. And we just didn't do it that
Mhm.
way.
Yeah, yeah, I gotta say that I'm a big fan of the Ed Milet podcast and
Yeah.
his books and everything. And one thing that he often talks about is immediate massive action, and
Yep.
that's what that sounds like. So often we're trying to wait for the right moment until everything's just exactly right before we release something, but then we've already blown our opportunity and missed our window. So that
Yep.
sounds like that's the same mindset that you take.
Yeah, I mean, we had
Right.
some companies say, what is your cadence for making updates? Is it once a month? Is it once a quarter? And I went, no, it's like 6 times a day. I
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah.
my engineers, as we were making updates, we didn't wait. We updated them. We threw them on our test environment. We verified, made sure everything worked correctly. Then we pushed it out so people could see these things changing and updating really fast. And so they knew we were listening and they always knew how to get a hold of me. So if they felt like somebody else wasn't listening, they knew how to call me every minute of the day. They could get a hold of me and know that I was listening. And to me, that
Mhm.
mattered. That was a reason why when somebody went from one firm to another where my product wasn't approved, that's why I didn't need a sales team because they got there and they said, I'm
Mhm.
not moving unless I can use this tool. And the company, well, what is this tool? And they would call me and they go, apparently we need you here, right? So, and that was it.
Yeah, well, Derek, your book, Put to the Test, When Life Demands More, Will You Make Excuses or Figure It Out? Can you share, give us a teaser of the book, share one compelling story from the book, and a lesson you learned from it.
You know, the book is I didn't want to write the book completely about the tech business and going through these lawsuits because I don't know if people would find that unbelievably intriguing, right? So I open up a lot in the book about the way I was raised, and I grew up in a military family. I went all over as a kid. Change was constant for me. The ability to make excuses was always presented to me on a silver platter. If I wanted them, they were there, right? And they were generally accepted. I think most people can find that. So I also share a lot of personal stories, a lot of things that I've been through that it's just very real, successes and
Mm.
setbacks and that sort of thing. One of the stories that I put in there is I mentioned this already. The first time I was given the opportunity to run my own firm, my own agency. I was 29 years old. I was the youngest person to ever get to be given this opportunity within this particular organization. And it was amazing to me. I was so confident and my self-confidence is a terrible substitution for self-awareness, and I learned that. And I remember getting into this role going, I can do this. I got this. And then I get there and realize, what am I doing? I don't even know who to turn to. I'm now in charge. I don't know who to turn to. And I realized really quick I was completely unprepared for this. And so one of the things that I talk about in this example is success is stairs all the way to the top. It's not an elevator ride, and you don't get to skip stairs. And
Mm,
I
mm,
was given the opportunity to skip a floor, skip 2 floors, right? I mean, I was literally given something that was so far above where I actually was that at the end of the day, after a few years, I was brought back down to reality to hit those steps. And in one way, I can look at it and go, that was a failure, right? I didn't accomplish what I set out to accomplish. On the other side of things, it was the greatest success I've ever had in my life because I learned so much from that. And that's one of the things that I'm working on with this company now and helping them is this leader is struggling with certain things. And I just shared with them the other day, you're literally where I was the first time I went through my journey of trying to lead an organization. You're making the same mistakes I made. You're going through the same growing pains I went through. It's not that you're doing it wrong. Trust me, this is part of the process. These are part of the stairs. The difference is you got me here who's been there and I'm here to help you. I didn't have that. I didn't know who to turn to, so nobody could help me figure that out. And
Hmm.
that to me matters a lot.
Yeah, and you see so many young people trying to take the shortcut to
Mhm.
success. And I keep telling them there is no shortcut.
Mhm.
Then you will, like, if you go too fast in that position, you will fall
Yep.
and you have to learn your lesson. And and we see this scenario in the global startup industry. So many 90, there's a 90% of the startups are failing.
Yep.
So 10% fail within the first year, and there's 70% fail within the 2 to 5 years. And
Yep.
I've observed many young people in Bangladesh also, they get $1 million seed money and they wasted on in a like a Google like environment, overhead cost, and all these kind of stuff. And within 2 to 3 years, they just collapse.
Yep.
So, what would be some of your advice to those young startup leaders? They have the idea, but they're in their 20s or early 30s, might not
Mhm.
have some of those experiences, but they had the idea and they got the seed money and now starting a startup. But what are some advice that you
Yeah.
might want to share?
Yeah, it's this other organization that I'm working with. One of the things that's interesting is they're looking to raise capital and there's money that's available to them from one of two different places. Same amount of money, the money that's available to them from a private equity, venture capital type, right? They're not going to help them build their business, but they want a smaller percentage for the money. This other one, same money, they can actually help them build their business. They can literally hand them their next clients on a platter, but they want a bigger percentage. And in this entrepreneur's mind, he's like, well, why would I give away a bigger percentage? I mean, seriously? I just told you why. Because one of them's going to help you build your business. The other one's just throwing
Right.
money at you, hoping you do something great with it. The biggest thing for me, as I've said this before, and I learned this, and I firmly believe this, and I don't mean this to be derogatory towards somebody who runs a company or has a, great position. You have to find somebody who's done it. One of the things that I learned when I was failing and struggling the first time was the people that I was surrounded with, the organization was trying to help introduce me to people. They were people that didn't build it from the ground up. So I remember meeting a guy, he's running a firm of financial advisors with 200 advisors, but he inherited it when it was 180 advisors strong.
Mm.
He had no idea what it took to go from 0 to 100. He went from 180 to 200. He already had the leadership team, he already had the systems and the structure. It's a very different mindset. It's a very different challenge. It's a very different struggle. And so you have to find people that have been there before. I talk about in the book, I went to college. Nobody else in my family went to college. That wasn't what we did. Nobody did that. And so when I was, making that decision, I couldn't lean on my family for that choice because to them that wasn't that important. It just you don't need to do that. You can do these other things like we all did. And so if you're going to go down the path of starting a business or solving a problem or doing something bigger and better and different than people that are in your network or surrounding, find the people that have done it. Find
Mm.
those people and ask those people the questions because that's what matters in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the biggest things I see too with entrepreneurs is going from say a 40-hour a week work week traditional
Yeah.
9 to 5 job to okay, now it's 60 hours a week or more. And we get that, right? We might even know what we're signing up for, but one of the challenges is the structure versus
Yep.
now utter lack of structure. So I'm curious more from a personal standpoint, how do you structure your days? Because I know going from a normal 9 to 5 work day for me to a okay, I'm ready for the 60-hour work week, but where do I even begin? How do you
Yep.
make sure that you have some sort of structure still in your life despite not having all of those calendar meetings in place like you did in your
Yeah.
previous career?
Yeah, the time is interesting. I remember going one of the universities I spoke at. I asked the group, if you start your own business, how many hours a week do you work? And I had the marker and I was writing it on the whiteboard and it was like 40, 50, 60, right? Everyone's throwing numbers out. And then I just wrote all of them. You work all of them.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing is you're trying to figure out what's the number of hours I got to put in to say I put in the right amount of time. It's all of them. You wake up at 2 a.m., you don't go back to sleep because your mind's racing. That's how it works. I think the biggest thing when it comes to what you're talking about in terms of the lack of structure is we talk about at the onset of this call, right? The accountability partners, right? Finding the people you can lean on, that you can talk to, that can hold you accountable, right? You have to be open to that accountability. A lot of people aren't, right? A lot of people will make excuses. Yes, Jim, I was going to, but this happened and therefore I didn't get it done. But when you're running the business, I didn't get it done is not acceptable. If it had to get done, it has to get done. I don't care what time of day or what struggles you had to get through to get it done. You have to get it done. That's important. And the second thing is you have to prioritize. And that's where I think a lot of these people fail is they can't properly prioritize what needs to get done, what is a must, and what is they have these different buckets of, urgent, important, all these different things. I used to have two different things on my desk, and on the urgent was on top, and then the important was on the bottom. And the objective was very simple. I filled the top tray every single day with stuff that I had to do the start of the next day. So the beginning of the day, the very next day, by about 8 a.m., that top tray had to be empty because I took care of everything that was urgent. And then I spend the day filling it back up, right? And so I have my tomorrow's urgent things, right? And then the important was on the bottom. This is not urgent, but when I get time at the end of the week or something like that, I can pull this out and get things done maybe over the weekend if I get a free hour or whatever it might be. I can pull that out and get the important things done. It's not as simple as like I think a lot of people will block their time sometimes and the blocks can mess with their heads.
Mhm.
I didn't do the blocks because it was so hard for me to follow the blocks. I just tried to prioritize my day and knew what I needed to get done throughout every single day to make sure it was effective.
Mm.
That's good.
That's a good
I,
response. Yeah.
Derrick, I gotta delve in. And first of all, I know you said you served in the military, so thank you for your service. With that in mind, though, because you did say there are some differences, but what
Mhm.
were you able to transfer from a leadership perspective of what you learned from the military that you could take into the civilian world?
Well, the biggest thing you take away in any sort of military training is adapting and overcoming,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it when I was on a deployment, I messed my back up really bad in 2002. Even I remember it's been so long. And I remember going to the doctor, and the doctor was like, "We don't know what's going on with your back, but we don't want you working anymore because we need to figure this out." Well, we were stretched thin. I was a fuels guy, and so I was refueling airplanes constantly throughout the day as they were coming and going. And we knew we were thin. We didn't have enough people, right? And so I remember going
Hmm.
back to my squad leader, and he said, "What'd the doctor say?" And I said, "The doctor told me to get back to work." And I did, and I went back to work, and I was in so much pain for months. I mean, I couldn't sit, I could barely stand. I was miserable, but work had to be done. And so for me, it was one way or the other, we had to get the work done. The pain wasn't going to stop me. It wasn't going to kill me. I had to get it done. And so the thing from the military for me is whatever it is you're dealing with, an excuse doesn't solve the problem. The problem still exists. We have to solve the problem. And nobody else was going to solve that. I couldn't make the guys that I was there with work 20 hours a day. We were already working 14, right? So I had to step up and do my part. To me, I felt like that was my responsibility to do. And so I think the biggest thing that most people coming from a leadership background, it's the ability to adapt, recognize things that maybe aren't working, recognize things that are, and create a new path and just figure it out.
But sometimes do you think that you also need to be a little bit compassionate about yourself also, because your well-being matters. Because if you
Mhm.
are not that leader who is having that mindset,
Mhm.
well-being in terms of health, emotion, mental, all these areas, sometimes we cannot even serve
Mhm.
our people. So, what are there things that you are now tackling more to take care of yourself?
Mhm.
How important is your well being now?
Yeah, it's different now. I think that's one of the things that comes with time, right? Is, when you're young, like I wasn't just gung ho. I was willing to work, 80, 90 hours a week. It didn't matter to me. It was just that's what I was willing to do. As I've gotten older, I recognize that's not smart. That's not healthy, right? You have to, like you said, you have to take time for that. And so my approach to not only how I treat myself, but everybody that works for me is very different as well, right? I'm a lot more willing to just let people do what they need to do. Take time, go to the gym, go see your family, take a vacation. As again, younger, eager, so fired up, sometimes I was not there. I wasn't, right? I think a lot of people make that same mistake. I just wasn't. But that's just the way it was. For me, though, like the other challenge that I still face today, and Jim, this is kind of your point, and the same for you, is I'm a very black and white person. I don't spend a lot of time in the gray. And so I don't deal with kind of, sort of, maybe. It just is or it isn't. So if you set a goal, if I'm going to accomplish something, did I do it? Yes or no? That's it. And so
Mhm.
my kids struggle with this. My wife is like, people are not wired like you, Derrick, right? You it's just not that way. It's like if I set a goal, did I accomplish it? And the biggest thing for me is like, let's just be honest. If the answer is no, the answer is no. 95% of the way is a no. That's okay. I'm not upset about that. The answer is a no. Now we have to figure out what was the difference between 95 and 100 so the next time we can get it even closer, right?
Mhm.
So it's very simple to me in my head. That's just the way I'm wired.
Mhm.
Civilian world, I think, is wired a little bit different, right? I mean, you ask my wife, I don't get anxious about anything. But being late, like people being late, people are like, ah, I'm close enough. Dinner was at 5. I'm here at 5:15. No, I've been
Mhm.
here since
No.
4:30. Right?
Right.
Like, I'm sorry, you're late. That drives me insane. It's just a black
Yeah.
and white thing. Were you on time?
Mhm.
No. Ugh, drives me nuts. But that's the thing I got to deal with. But yeah, that's
So
that's the other challenge that I.
decisiveness, yeah. So
Yeah,
being a
it's
leader,
beautiful.
decisiveness is very important. So that is one thing I'm always trying to follow, that it has to be a decisive answer,
Mhm.
or else you I will keep everybody hanging in the middle.
Yep.
So if I'm able to go there or not, if I'm able to submit it on time or not. And I have seen some leaders who are like, oh, probably I will try to get that paper done. I'm like, no, just let me know if you could do it or not. Then we can take contingency plan and things like that.
Yep.
And I think that is so appreciable, and one of the key leadership skill from my angle, like
Yeah.
being decisive.
Well, and I live in Minnesota now, right? And if you've never heard the term, I'll introduce you to it. It's called Minnesota Nice. And
Mm.
Minnesota Nice to me, and I'm not from here, and I always laugh at it that it's not really Minnesota Nice, it's Minnesota passive aggressive. And
Oh,
it's you hear this kind of, yeah, maybe, sort of, right? And it's like, no, just yes or no. Can you get this done? Yes or no? Not kind of,
right.
sort of, maybe. It just, let's just be honest. Let's just move forward and be honest. And that to
Exactly.
me is a really big deal. And it's nothing for me that I do out of being rude or anything like that. It's just once you get to know me, you realize, hey, let's just, like to your point, let's just be decisive. Let's make a statement. Let's follow through on it. Let's be a man of our word and move on.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. John,
So,
I'll say one thing and then I know you
yep.
got a question, but is that Derek, you and I would get along because my players know how strong I am about being on time. I used to give them the option, if you can't be on time, be early. So
Yep.
they usually figured that one out. So, but
It was funny. I remember coaching my son's football team when he was really little, elementary school, and there was a kid that I coached in like second grade, and he was playing corner for me on defense. And he knew the rule was you were never allowed to let somebody get outside of you on the corner. That's the number one rule, never allowed. And I hadn't coached the kid for like 3 years after that. And then he was on my team again. And he said, I can't wait to play with you again, coach. And I said, do you remember my number one rule? And he said, I do. I'm never allowed to let anybody get on the outside. I remember that. I've never forgot it. I'm like,
uh,
perfect. That's good. I don't have to reteach it. You got it. That's the rule. Don't let it happen. And I don't care if you make the tackle. I don't care if he scores a touchdown, but he's going to go inside of you, never outside of you. That's
right.
just the way it's going to work.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, in entrepreneurship and really in life in general, this is just something that I've noticed. And
mhm,
I don't know if it's a trend that we've all noticed, but just this softness and this inability to take feedback. A lot
mhm.
of times we feel offended. It's kind of a cultural thing right now. We feel offended by feedback. We consider people who are giving us maybe even constructive feedback as just haters who don't
Yep.
understand how we conduct business. But taking feedback is so important. So, two-part
Mhm.
question for you. Number one, how has feedback externally helped you in the growth and the scaling of your tech company? But then step two, how do you effectively implement feedback to your team members?
Yeah, so I mean, look, when you're going to step out and be an entrepreneur, right, and build something and do something different, the world has a way of showing you things, right? It just has a way of reminding you. The one thing for me that I think is also really important about feedback is, and I actually write about this in the book, is the network you surround yourself with matters a ton. And one of the things that was kind of a shock to me is, and I certainly don't mean to be controversial, but it was amazing to me how many people you could tell didn't want me to succeed.
Mm.
As weird as that sounds, and I see it now with my son. He's a basketball player. He's a great athlete. He's a great kid. You can see it because the competition is so great that they don't want you to succeed. And so instead of being there to help somebody, there's a lot of people that are there to pull you back. Youth sports is crazy to me because it's not just the other kids, it's the other parents that sometimes you see it from. And so for me, I'm always trying to the feedback with my son and with athletes and with everybody else, the biggest thing I think is trying to remove your ego from it. Early on in my career, my ego was a big part of my feedback because I was like, I'm smart. I have this title. I have this position. Nobody cares. And so the second you realize, take my ego out of it, you can just watch the other person just disarm almost immediately, where they realize, like, I'm not doing this because I think I'm better than you. I'm not sharing this because I'm smarter than you or I'm better than you. And again, I also don't do it in a way that I make a lot of statements. I ask a lot of questions. There was a communication that came through about 2 months ago with an organization I was working with where this gentleman responded in a text message to a group of people, very, very rude. And so I just called him. I said, if you could go back and do it again, would you send the same message the same way? And he said, no. If you could go back and do it again, how would you change that message? And he's like, and I went, don't even say it, just send it to me directly. So just send it to me. And he sent it to me. And when he got done sending it to me, it was completely different. And I said, okay, my only last question to you is there any reason why you wouldn't resend this to the group this way versus the other way? And he went, no. Good, hit send. It's fine. I could have said you were 100% wrong. I could have just berated him and yelled at him. That wasn't the right thing to do. So I think in order the receptiveness of the feedback, John, take your ego, get rid of it. It's only going to get in the way. There's a book. I love the book. If anybody's listening to this and you haven't read it, Ego is the Enemy. It's a phenomenal book. And that talks a lot about that. Get rid of that ego. It's amazing what it does to feedback sessions.
That's really good. Well, as we wrap up, I have one final question, Derek. I actually, it depends on, I see a football behind you with the Jets. Is that the New York Jets?
It is. Yep.
All right, so I got to have a little fun with you. I'm a Bills fan, and both of
Okay.
us, although the Jets have won one Super Bowl, the Bills have been there 4 times. But I'm curious because the Jets have been through a real drought. They haven't been in the playoffs in a long time.
Hmm.
Give me your insight on what's the issue there. Why have they been so bad for so long?
Well, first you got to remember, I also live in Minnesota, so I got a bunch of disappointed Vikings fans every year.
Yes, yeah, like the Bills
Um,
have lost in 4 Super Bowls, so we know that. So
well, first of all, let me tell you real quick why I'm a Jets fan, and it's 100% spite. When my dad retired from the Army, we moved here. I didn't have a favorite football team. And I
okay.
was in eighth grade, and I remember telling some kids I didn't have a favorite football team. And I mentioned the Jets, like Keyshawn Johnson or somebody like that. I just mentioned something about the Jets, and everybody started making fun of me. You're a Jets fan? And I'm going, no. But they kept making fun of me. And I went, you know what? That's it. I'm a Jets fan. And so I've been a Jets fan since eighth grade, 100% out of spite, and I suffer every year as a result of that decision. It's hard to say. I mean, you know this, right? In sports, winning is contagious.
Mm,
Losing is contagious, right? You can feel it. You can feel the aura when you go into a room of winners where it's just like nothing is going to get in our way. Somebody's hurt, we're going to step up. It's no big deal. And you can tell in any locker room, in any sports or athletic or even company culture environment where they're like, we're not going to let something hold us back from accomplishing what we're great at, what we're set out to do. I just don't think, I don't know, if the Jets over the course of the years just haven't had that. I mean, I don't know. It's a hard thing to put your finger on, right? It can't be a talent thing because there's so much talent in this league,
right.
but there's clearly that sort of issue that permeates a lot of teams in this league. The Bills are great. I firmly believe it's going to be the Bills or Baltimore this year in the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
but both of them have a hurdle to get over. They got to get over that hump. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
They're fun to watch though. They're really fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Derek, as we wrap up in our time here, and it's okay. You're probably talking to a lot of Bills fans. So I hope nobody lost too much respect for you.
No,
Although I think we
they're
can gain
fun.
some respect for you because of the amount of years that you've gone through the
Hmm.
horrible suffering that it is to be a Jets fan.
Yep.
And I certainly genuinely hope it gets better for you guys because
Yeah.
I can never wish good on the Patriots, but we can wish good on the Jets.
We can collectively agree to that. That's fair. Yes.
But so you sold the company
Yep.
and now you're in a different sort of venture. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and what that transition was like as you obviously very exciting to sell a company, but
Mhm.
also a huge change.
It's a bigger change than I think most people recognize, right? The company that bought mine, they wanted me to stay on. I wanted to stay on. There was so much that I wanted to accomplish after winning all these lawsuits and doing all these things, and I did not want to leave the company. And when I stayed on, they kept me on, and they were excited to have me on. I just realized the way they do things was just so different, and I found myself, and I remember saying to them like, I'm the problem. I'm the fly in the ointment. I'm used to doing it the way that I've always done it. You guys have teams of people and departments and all these people making decisions. I'm not even in these conversations anymore. It just doesn't feel right to me. And so that's when I said, I'm just going to step away. And the product's doing great, the company's doing great, but man, that separation is really hard. When you love something and you believe in something and you fight for it for so long, when you walk away from it, it's really difficult. And I don't think a lot of people can understand that until you've done it. But people said to me all the time, like, founders never stay. It's way too hard. And I went, no, this will be different. It's really hard. And so for me, it was like therapy, right? I wanted to write the book to just share my story and get that out there and just tell everybody what I went through and make sure people understand I'm not special. There's anything about me that's special, but here's how I think. And then, took some time for myself and then just started consulting and speaking. And I love that stuff. That's so
Yes.
much fun for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So where can we find Put to the Test and get in touch with you if we're interested in learning more about your consulting or speaking?
Yeah, so the easiest place, the book is available, basically anywhere, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart. But there's links to all of that too on my website, where you can also contact me. And the website is just my name, derrickgirard.com.
DerrickGirard.com, links in down there in the show notes, and it's Derrick. So just a heads up on that link down in the show notes. So just click that, head on over to Derrick's website, learn more, get in touch if that's something that interests you, and definitely check out Put to the Test. That link also down in the show notes as well there for you. Derrick, you shared so much with us today for entrepreneurs, for leaders, and I love how some things that you shared doesn't really matter if you're an entrepreneur or not. Your FIO mindset and all the other things that you talked about, so valuable for all of us. So thanks for your time today on the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Thanks for having me.